So you ever wonder how someone who's brand new to Christianity actually grows up, spiritually? Is there a roadmap for that journey? Well, according to our source material today, the Bible actually has one, but it seems like it's been largely forgotten, and that's left a huge gap in how the church really nurtures its newest members.
Right out of the gate, the source makes this really provocative claim. It argues that by failing to intentionally feed new believers, the lambs that Jesus talked about, a lot of churches are, well, unintentionally, creating a kind of spiritual orphanage. New Christians are just left without a clear path, feeling vulnerable and missing that foundational nourishment they desperately need to grow.
So what's going wrong? The problem, according to this analysis, really comes down to the diet. Are we giving new believers the specific milk they need, or are we just throwing this confusing buffet at them that's meant for everybody, even people who haven't even joined the flock yet?
In this slide, it just lays the contrast out perfectly. The current model is often pretty haphazard. I mean, think about it. A small group might read whatever the book of the month is, and that can be great, but it's not a systematic foundation. It mixes new believers with seekers, lambs and goats in the source's terms, and there's this heavy focus on attraction and marketing. But the biblical model that's being proposed is structured, it's curated by the Bible itself, and it's laser-focused on nurturing those lambs with a very specific set of foundational doctrines.
And the consequences of this wrong diet? Honestly, they're kind of heartbreaking. Without a solid foundation, new believers can so easily drift away. They can become really susceptible to cults that offer them that structure they're craving. Or they just stay as spiritual infants for years and years, never really progressing to maturity. It's a recipe for a weak and unstable church.
But there is a solution. And it's not some new program or a fancy book from a publisher. It's about rediscovering the curriculum that's already in the New Testament, a foundational milk diet for every single new Christian.
So this milk diet, it comes from a passage in Hebrews chapter 6, and it lists 6 elementary doctrines that form the absolute bedrock of the Christian faith. The idea is really simple. You have to master this spiritual milk before you can move on to the solid food of deeper theology. You got to master the milk before you can handle the steak, right?
So what's on the menu? What are these 6 doctrines? Well, they fall into 3 really neat pairs. First up, soteriology, which is just a big word for the doctrine of salvation. It's about repentance and faith in God. Second, ecclesiology, which is all about how we do church, teachings on things like baptisms and the laying on of hands. And third, eschatology, the doctrine of the end game, the resurrection of the dead and eternal judgment. This is the starting syllabus.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, that's just one passage in Hebrews. How important is this stuff really? And that is a great question. To answer it, we have to look at what the writers of the New Testament actually spent their time writing about. Where did they put their focus?
Okay, so let's try to put a number on it. What percentage of the entire New Testament is actually about these 3 areas: salvation, the church, and the end times? What do you think? 10%? 20%? The answer is, well, it's probably going to surprise you.
It's roughly 67%. Yeah, you heard that right. Based on a thematic analysis of all 27 books of the New Testament, about 2/3 of the content is dedicated to explaining and reinforcing these foundational doctrines. 2/3!
And this chart really just drives the point home, doesn't it? The vast majority of the apostolic teaching, the God-breathed instruction for the church, falls squarely into these categories. The rest of it is mostly narrative, ethical teachings, and historical accounts that all exist to support this doctrinal core.
So, here's the crucial point to all this. When the Bible calls these doctrines elementary, it doesn't mean they're simplistic or, optional. It means they are the elements, the fundamental building blocks that everything else is built on. They are absolutely essential.
Okay, so if 2/3 of the New Testament is about this stuff, what does that mean for the church's priorities today? Specifically, where does the money go?
And this is where the disconnect gets kind of wild. The source estimates that over 20% of church resources often go toward attraction and marketing. Things like high-tech sound and lighting systems. Meanwhile, only a tiny fraction, maybe 5%, is intentionally invested in this foundational milk diet for new believers. So this leads to a pretty radical question, doesn't it? What if we completely flip that? What if church budgets actually started to reflect the priorities we see baked into the New Testament itself?
The source proposes a specific number, dedicating a full 30% of church resources specifically to the task of feeding new lambs. We're not talking about a small program, but but a massive, intentional investment in building a solid foundation for every single new believer who walks through the doors.
Okay, so what would that even look like in practice? It's not just about throwing money at the problem, right? It's about building a robust, Bible-centered curriculum. The source actually sketches out a potential 2-year discipleship plan designed to take a spiritual infant all the way to maturity.
So here's the roadmap. The first 8 months are a deep dive into soteriology, building an unshakable confidence in their salvation. The next 8 months focus on ecclesiology, helping them find their place and how to function within the body of the church. And the final 8 months tackle eschatology, equipping them to live with an eternal perspective. By the end of those 24 months, that new believer is ready for solid food.
And this whole plan is built on a few key principles. First, sola scriptura, the Bible is the only textbook. The learning is recursive, meaning you revisit these core truths over and over until they become second nature. It's practical, designed for mastery through real-world application. And the ultimate goal? It isn't just knowledge, it's creating mature believers who are equipped to go out and teach others, continuing the cycle.
So when you boil it all down, it comes to this. The challenge from our source is about a fundamental shift in focus, from spending immense resources trying to attract a crowd, to deliberately and systematically feeding the flock that Jesus entrusted to his followers. Which leaves us with one final and pretty provocative question to chew on. What would actually happen to the church and its mission if we unplug the rock concert? Forever. What if we completely set aside the focus on performance and attraction in favor of this deep, intentional, biblical model of nurturing believers? What would change?